Today you will learn how to do a thumbnail that looks like this. The first thing I recommend is to have a folder ready with the picture that we will need. Now we will need an image of the subject, an image for the background, and an image with some particles. You can find images like these in the internet for free. You can use Pixabay or have a quick search on Google or YouTube to find similar images. Let's go straight into our photo editing software. In my case, I'm using Affinity Photo. Link to that in the description below. Let's first of all create a new document. You want to have this type of resolution, 1280 by 720, and you can just click on create. Now this is your canvas, and this is exactly the size, the optimal size for a YouTube thumbnail. Now if we go to our folders, we know that we want our subject here. You can press V to select the image, and I would suggest to just resize it until it fits inside of our canvas. Now the next step to do here is to remove the background from the foreground or from our subject. To do so, we have here a tool that is called selection brush tool, which will basically select wherever you paint it on. So we want to paint it over our subject to select it. Now let's zoom in a little bit. You can increase or decrease the size of your brush and then start selecting. Now you will see the selection tool will make some little mistakes here and there, but that's not an issue. We will be able to correct those in a second. It has done a fairly decent job here in selecting. We see that it over selected here in some areas and it didn't select all of the shoulder. That's an easy fix. Just zoom in a little bit, and here on the top you can choose between add a selection or subtract a selection. In this case we want to subtract whatever was selected by mistake. So here we are good, and here we need to add a little bit of selection. So let's go back to select and let's maybe reduce the size of our selection brush, and maybe here we subtract a little bit again. And this one looks fairly good for a first selection. It's good enough. Good. Now you could already mask it out, meaning that it will erase everything except of our selection. However, we have some edges that are a little bit harsh. So we can smooth them out by clicking on refine and just increase maybe by 2 pixels the smoothing of the edges. You can click apply. It's a little bit more smooth, and it will also be beneficial now when we add some effects to the picture. Before doing so, I realized that I did not duplicate the image. So in the beginning you want to duplicate the original image just in case you're making any mistakes. So here click on the layer with the image and Control Command J to duplicate. Now we have 2 of those. Let's take the first one and mask it out. So to mask out the subject, pretty easy, just click on mask layer and it will have masked it out. Now why we don't see anything, it's because we have the original image selected, so you can just unselect it, and here we go, we have our subject. Now with Control Command D you can unselect the selection, press on V to get the move tool, and now we can move our subject around. Pretty cool, right? We can resize it and position it wherever we want. Now that we remove the background, it looks a little bit empty, so we need to add a new background, preferably one that you like, that represents a little bit the mood or the content of your video. Now in this case, as just an exhibition, I have this nice image here from Pixabay, which is a living room. It's just imported. Now we can resize it a little bit to our liking, and as you can see now we see our background, but we don't see our selection anymore. That's because layers works from top to bottom, so whatever is on the top will be shown, as our selection, our subject is beneath or below it, we cannot see it. So very easy to fix. Just take the layer and move it under the subject. So here we go. We now have already a new background for our subject. Now you can see that the colors are very similar. I'm wearing a gray t-shirt here, so I'm blending into the background. There's no real division. In order to have a division you have different ways, but what I want to do here is to darken the background, as I also want to add some lights later on to give a little bit of a moody atmosphere to this picture or to the thumbnail. So what we can do is click on the adjustments and add an exposure adjustment that will darken or lighten the background. So here in our case we want to have it a little bit darker, actually quite dark if possible, and we want only the adjustment layer, the exposure adjustment, to affect the background. So we can make this layer a child of the layer with the background. This means whatever I manipulate here will always and only affect the layer it is linked to, which in our case is the background layer. So let's make it nice and dark again and just click on X and we're good to go. We have our subject, we have our background that is now with a proper exposure. Next thing to do is to add some lights between subject and background. Now to do so, just create a new layer, a new pixel layer, and let's choose the brush tool that we have on B in Affinity Photo. I'm sure in other photo editing software it will be on B or another shortcut, but it's the paintbrush tool. You will have it in any of the softwares, right? So let's increase the size. You can already see it's having a dark background. In our case we don't want black, but we want a blue. Okay, here you see. So the more you increase the brush tool size, you see, the more you have this effect of colors fading out, right? You can, and I would advise to put the hardness to 0, which gives you even more fading out effect. So let's make a nice big brush size here and just click a couple of times around the subject. So to give like a blue light that is shining from behind, okay? Now to make this look a little bit more realistic, you can add a new pixel layer, change the color to white for a brush, maybe go exactly behind our subject and also press one time. Now you see that this one gave like a white center, and this just looks a little bit more realistic, right? I mean, in the center of the light source it's usually very bright and the color only really gets intense around the center. Okay, we can see that our layers to the right are a little bit messy and we don't really know what layer is about. So I advise to just organize them a little bit. In order to do so, we can group layers. For instance, these two lights, they can and should always belong together. We don't want to move them independently. So select both layers, click Ctrl or Command G, and you will have grouped them. So if I'm about to move this layer, it will move both linked layers simultaneously and keeping their ratio intact. Now the next thing you would like to do is to give them maybe a name that makes more sense. Let's say that you're working on a thumbnail for multiple days and you reopen it maybe a couple of days later, and you already forgot what all these things are. So I like just to give them a name. I know that this one is the original image that we had. This one here is our background, right? This one here are the lights that we just added. And this one here is the subject, right? The selection of the subject. So like this, I already know more or less what each layer represents. So the next thing to do is to add some glow around and on our subject, okay? Since we have this light coming from behind, we want the subject to somehow bounce off some of that light, but also have some of that light on the subject itself. This is fairly easy in Affinity Photo. You can just click the layer with the subject, and here you have a layer effects area. And here specifically we have two areas that are interesting for us, which would be the outer and the inner glow. Now what I like to do is to choose a darker color for the outer glow and a lighter color for the inner glow. Now we have a blue tint here, so I will choose darkish blue color for the outer glow and increase the radius. Now you maybe not see it that much, but if I crank it up, you will see around my head how the radius changes, right? So we can put up the intensity. So here you see exactly what is happening now. You don't want to be too extreme, but you definitely want it to be visible, especially because the thumbnail then will not be as huge as here, but you will see it in a smaller window. So the effect can be a little bit exaggerated, let's say. Now the inner glow, as I said, I like to take a little bit of lighter color, and also here you will be able to see this a little bit better, how this is affecting us. Now let's go a little bit. I do want it to be quite on the subject, so I want some of the light spilling on it. Now here obviously it's all about personal preferences, but I think I'm happy with this result, and feel free to play around as long as needed until you are fully satisfied with the results. Now that our subject has been lighted, we can add some text. Now to add some text, we have here the frame text tool. Just click on it and drag a text field to add your text. Now I will call this text make thumbnails like this. It's almost invisible, but I actually wrote something, so let's first of all change the color to white and increase the size, and also change the fonts. Now here feel free to choose font sizes and colors to your liking, and this one here is it's all based on preferences, right? So what I'm doing here is, while I have one of the text selected, I click Ctrl J twice now, because I need 4 text fields for the message that I want to put here for the text, right? Now I want to write make thumbnails. Let's make this a little bit bigger, like this. Great. And I want thumbnails to be a little bit bigger. Let me get this one. Yeah, maybe that's too big. Let's maybe go with 120. It looks good. Now let's mark them all and let's align them. You usually should be able to do this in all photo editing softwares. You could do it manually, but I mean, why doing it manually if a system can do it accurately for you? So let's align them first, the vertical space, and then also align them to the left. Good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to highlight the word thumbnail. For this I will just change the color and make it yellow. It's a nice contrast to the blue and the dark background per se. And here now we can do the same that we did before with the lights. We can mark all of these text layers, click Ctrl or Command G to group them, and we can call it text. The good thing about grouping a text is that we can now apply an effect to it, and it will be applied on all the texts that are part of this group. Okay, let me show you what I mean. I can click on layer effects like before, and we can give this, for instance, an outline. And if I increase the outline space, you can see that the outline is applied to every single text field. Now we don't want too much of an outline, just a little bit, because what we want to do instead is to add again some glow. Now here, same as before, we will add some blue outer glow, and inner glow we will do something more light bluish. Very well. And I also like to add a shadow if it's a text. See the intensity. There we are. This one just gives a little bit of depth to the text. Again, feel free to play around with all these effects until you achieve a result that you're happy with. Now, I think the text is a little bit too much in the center, so let's take the move tool and move it a little bit up. Now the good thing, since I selected the group, I don't need to worry about misaligning the text. It will just be moved and stay aligned the same way that it was before. And we are pretty much done with the thumbnail per se. The only thing you would like to add here now is a product, a picture, or whatever it is that you are pointing to. Otherwise the pointing wouldn't make that much sense. So in my case, what we can do is to put the same thumbnail we just did, right? And once exported, we can drop it inside. Click on the V tool again. Now here we want to resize it a little bit, right? Put it in the center, and now you want to give it some outer glow as well. Now here I chose yellow, since we have the yellow thumbnail color. You can give it a nice yellow outer glow, and you can give it also yellowish inner glow, so it pops a little bit from the background. And voila, this is how you do this type of thumbnails in Affinity Photo, and I'm sure that you can replicate this type of flow to most of the other photo editing softwares. Thank you for watching, stay safe, best wishes, and see you next time.